There's a moment most dog owners have experienced at least once, even if they never talked about it out loud. You're walking through your own house, a place your dog knows by heart, every corner, every smell, every creak in the floor, and then for no reason you can identify, your dog stops, right at the doorway, and won't go in. Not because they're distracted, not because there's food somewhere else. They just stop. Sometimes they back away slowly. Sometimes they stare into the room like something is in there you can't see. Sometimes they whine, or press their body against your leg, or simply refuse to move no matter what you do. And in that moment, something happens to you too. Something you can't quite explain. You look into the room yourself. Nothing's there. And yet, that feeling doesn't go away easily. If you've ever had that experience, you already know why this topic has fascinated people for centuries. And if you've never had it, stick around. Because what researchers have discovered about why dogs behave this way is genuinely harder to dismiss than you might think. Welcome! If this kind of question keeps you up at night, you're going to feel right at home here. Before we get into the science, let's sit with the experience for a moment. Because that's where this really lives. Not in a laboratory, but in an ordinary hallway, on an ordinary afternoon, with a dog you've known for years behaving like a stranger just walked into your house. People describe this in remarkably consistent ways. The dog refuses a specific room. Not the house, just one room, or one corner, or one particular spot. Sometimes it lasts a few hours, sometimes days. Sometimes it never fully resolves. And almost universally, the person describing it says the same thing. It wasn't just that the dog was acting strange, it was that the dog's behavior made them feel something too. That's the part that stays with people. Not the mystery of what the dog was sensing, but the way that moment transferred, like the dog handed something invisible to the human standing next to them. And that transfer, as it turns out, is not entirely in your imagination. Dogs have been living alongside humans for somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years, depending on which study you read. That's not a casual relationship. That's a coevolutionary bond so deep that dogs have physically changed, neurologically and hormonally, to be attuned to us, and we to them, in ways we're only beginning to understand. One of the most quietly remarkable studies on this came out of Azabu University in Japan, where researchers found that when dogs and their owners made prolonged eye contact, both species experienced a measurable rise in oxytocin, the same bonding hormone released between human mothers and their newborns. That's not a metaphor. That's a measurable biochemical response occurring between two entirely different species just by looking at each other. What this tells us is that the emotional connection most dog owners feel toward their animals isn't just sentiment, it's biological, it's wired in. And that connection runs in both directions, which means that when a dog senses something, the human nearby is primed, physiologically, to receive that signal. That's the foundation. Now let's talk about what dogs can actually sense. The dog's nose is one of the most sophisticated biological instruments on the planet. Most estimates suggest dogs can detect odors at concentrations somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 times lower than humans can. But the more interesting question isn't just how sensitive the nose is, it's what kind of information that nose is actually processing. Dogs can detect changes in human body chemistry. They can smell the cortisol released by a person under stress. They can detect the specific volatile compounds produced when blood sugar drops in a diabetic person before the person feels any symptoms. There are documented cases, not anecdotes, but formally trained and medically verified cases of dogs alerting to seizures before they happen, detecting certain types of cancer through smell alone, and identifying COVID-positive individuals with accuracy rates competitive with rapid testing. At the Medical Detection Dogs Charity in the UK, dogs have been trained to identify ovarian cancer, Parkinson's disease, and bacterial infections with extraordinary precision, all through scent alone. So when your dog stops at a doorway, one honest question worth asking is, what is in that room, chemically, that your nose simply cannot detect? Gas leaks, mold colonies hidden behind walls, electrical burning, structural decay, carbon monoxide at levels not yet high enough to trigger your detector. These are not supernatural explanations. They are documented cases where dogs have refused spaces that later turned out to be genuinely dangerous in ways no human had identified. But there's more to this than chemistry. Dogs also process sound at frequencies we cannot hear. Their upper hearing range extends to around 65 kilohertz. Ours stops at roughly 20. That's an entire world of sound, squeaks, vibrations, structural resonance, animal movement in walls, that is simply invisible to human perception but completely audible to a dog. Infrasound, sound below the range humans consciously detect, is produced by a surprising number of things. Running water at a distance, certain kinds of machinery, weather systems, seismic activity, and some researchers believe that animals, including dogs, are sensitive to infrasound in ways that can create genuine physical discomfort or alertness responses. This may be part of why dogs have been observed behaving unusually before earthquakes. It's a documented phenomenon, reported across many cultures in many centuries. The United States Geological Survey acknowledges that while the evidence is anecdotal and inconsistent, unusual animal behavior before seismic events has been noted often enough to be taken seriously as an area of ongoing research. A dog refusing a specific room might be responding to a vibration, a hum, a frequency produced by a pipe, a transformer, an appliance, or simply the physics of how sound travels through that particular space, none of which you would hear. All of which your dog absolutely would. Now here's where it gets more complex, because sometimes the explanations above don't fully account for what people describe. Sometimes the room a dog refuses is one they've always been comfortable in. Nothing about the structure has changed. No new appliances, no detectable odors, no infrasound a technician could identify. And yet the dog behaves as though the room itself has changed. These are the cases that stay with people longest, and they often happen during specific times in a person's life. After a loss, during illness, after someone has died in the home, after a significant emotional event. And here is where the science takes an interesting turn, not into the supernatural, but into something perhaps more quietly profound. Dogs are extraordinarily sensitive to human emotional states, not just through body language and vocalization, though both of those matter enormously, but through scent. Human emotional states produce measurable chemical changes in the body. Fear, grief, anxiety, and shock all alter the volatile compounds we emit. Research published in the journal Learning and Behavior found that dogs matched human emotional cues across both visual and olfactory channels simultaneously. They weren't just reading faces, they were reading chemistry. If a person is experiencing grief, if they are carrying the weight of a loss, moving through a house where something has changed, a dog is picking up on that in ways no human observer could. The room where someone died doesn't look different, but it may smell different, in ways that are real and chemically measurable, for longer than people realize. And a dog that keeps stopping at that doorway may not be seeing something impossible, they may be smelling something true. There's a behavioral dimension here that's worth sitting with too. Dogs are creatures of pattern. Their sense of security, in large part, is built on the consistency of their environment. The same smells, the same sounds, the same furniture arrangement, the same daily rhythms. When something disrupts that consistency, even in a way that isn't visible to us, a dog's natural response can be avoidance behavior. This is especially pronounced in dogs with what researchers call high environmental sensitivity. Some breeds, and some individual dogs regardless of breed, are simply more attuned to changes in their surroundings. They notice faster, they react more visibly, and their threshold for something here has changed, is much lower than ours. Dr. Alexandra Horowitz, a cognitive scientist at Barnard College, who has spent years studying the inner lives of dogs, has written extensively about how differently dogs experience the same physical space as the humans who inhabit it. To us, a room is a visual experience first. To a dog, it is a chemical landscape, a sound environment, a history of everything that has happened there, all of it present simultaneously, all of it informing how they feel about being in that space. What we see as an empty room, a dog experiences as a room full of information. There is one more layer to this that researchers have been quietly exploring, and it may be the most interesting of all. Dogs form memories. This is no longer scientifically controversial. Studies using episodic-like memory tasks have shown that dogs can recall specific past events, including things they were not explicitly trained to remember. They remember people. They remember places. They remember events that were emotionally significant. In a study conducted by researchers at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, part of the Family Dog Project in Budapest, one of the most rigorous ongoing programs studying dog cognition in the world, dogs demonstrated the ability to recall and reenact human actions they had observed, but were not instructed to repeat. This was evidence of what scientists call do-as-I-do memory, a form of episodic recall previously thought to be uniquely or primarily human. What this means, in the context of a room a dog refuses, is something worth thinking about slowly. If something significant, emotionally charged, physically intense, or sensorially overwhelming happened in a particular space, a dog may carry a memory of that event, not a vague association, a specific, retrievable memory that resurfaces when they approach that location again. Approaching that doorway doesn't just feel different, it remembers different. Some people will hear all of this and feel it still doesn't fully explain what they experienced. The timing was too precise. The reaction was too specific. The dog seemed to be responding not just to a smell or a sound, but to something with presence. This is where science reaches its honest boundary, and where human experience continues past it. What's worth acknowledging is that the boundary of scientific understanding is not the same as the boundary of what is real. There are documented phenomena, in animal behavior, in neuroscience, in sensory biology, that we cannot yet fully explain. And the history of science is full of moments when something that seemed mystical turned out, eventually, to have an elegant mechanism no one had thought to look for yet. Whether a dog stopping at a doorway is responding to infrasound, chemical memory, emotional transmission, or something we don't yet have the language to describe, the experience itself is real. the behavior is documented. And the feeling it produces in the humans who witness it is consistent enough, across cultures and centuries, that dismissing it entirely seems like the less curious choice. Dogs have been watching us for as long as we've been watching them. They've lived in our homes, followed us through our losses, pressed their bodies against us in the dark, and stood in doorways looking at things we couldn't see. Maybe they're protecting us from something chemical we can't smell. Maybe they're hearing something structural we can't perceive. Maybe they're carrying a memory of something that happened in that space and choosing quietly not to re-enter it. Or maybe, and this might be the most unsettling possibility of all, they're simply reading us better than we read ourselves. Responding to a grief we haven't named yet, or a fear we haven't admitted, or a change in the house that we've been trying not to think about. Whatever the explanation, there's something worth paying attention to in the fact that across thousands of years and thousands of cultures, people have noticed the same thing. The dog knows something you don't, and rather than barking, or running, or making a scene, they simply stop and wait. They're not trying to frighten you. If anything, they seem to be doing something much quieter than that. They seem to be keeping watch. If you've had an experience like this, a moment where your dog's behavior made you feel something you couldn't quite explain, I'd genuinely love to hear about it. Some of the most powerful stories shared here come from people who've never told anyone before, and maybe animals notice more than we realize. I'll see you in the next one.